At Facebook, our goal is to create a welcoming and safe environment so people can share and connect with their friends and families. Every day, people around the world share billions of things on Facebook. The conversations that happen here reflect the diversity of this global community. But occasionally, people share content that can be abusive or harmful. That's why we created Facebook Community Standards, to explain what kinds of things can and cannot be shared on the site.
A video from Facebook released over the weekend, and Facebook says that they're clarifying their standards as it pertains to what can be posted on the social media site. In light of ISIS using Twitter and Facebook to show those barbaric acts they've perpetrated, this has forced the social media world to shut down certain pages and reiterate or indeed change their standards. For more on this story and others pertaining to social media, we're joined by freelance journalist Jacob Silverman. Jacob is the author of the new book. In fact, it's just been released today. It's entitled Terms of Service: Social Media and the Price of Constant Connection. We should note that Jacob is connected to us via Newsmax New York and, of course, from Newsmax LA. Our contributor Larry Elder remains here with us. So, Jacob, here's Facebook with, quote, community standards. What's your view of those current community standards?
Well, I think it's probably a step in the right direction. I don't think this will ever be sort of a finished process. I think that Facebook is going to have to continually reassess and refine what its rules really are, how it wants to maintain a safe environment on its website, and what that really looks like. So I think it's good that they've made what seems like a strong effort to refine those standards and communicate them to the public, but I certainly expect some of those rules might change, or some people might, with very legitimate reasons, protest against some of them and perhaps argue for future changes.
Jacob, does it surprise you that so many people are willing to give up so much privacy in exchange for the convenience of social media like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram?
Well, it does surprise me in some ways. On the other hand, I don't think you can discount the convenience factor. And these services are very appealing and very popular, obviously, and the fact that they're free is very tempting. I also think that people don't always know what it means when we say giving up privacy. We might have an idea that these companies are collecting personal information, but we don't always know how much they're collecting, who they're selling it to, what kind of dossiers they're forming on us. So I think there is a real sense in which a lot of customers just, for understandable reasons, aren't fully informed about what's going on behind the scenes.
Well, the growth of social media continues unabated, and that's having consequences, I think, really almost in every venue of current culture. For example, there was a video released by the U.S. Army Command and General Staff College. Let's listen to a part of that and then give your thoughts on it, Jacob.
Is shifting the power away from the traditional media conglomerates, and by doing so, it is transforming the way we interact with each other. Now, everyone with a computer can talk and be heard. And that's big. With 75% of Americans using these technologies every day, you owe it to yourself and you owe it to your business to learn the ropes and get involved.
Now, in terms of our involvement for psychological operations with the military, it looks like we're lagging behind ISIS and some of those groups who are using social media. Jacob, how long do you think it's going to take for our guys to catch up to what those guys are doing?
Oh, well, that's hard to say. I think the advantage in the long term certainly lies with entities like the U.S. government. I think you'd be much more likely to see Twitter start banning ISIS-related accounts before it starts banning, U.S. military accounts. On the other hand, the U.S. government or any other government generally has to abide by certain rules and has to deal with kind of entrenched bureaucracies and probably has to get many approvals for even just one tweet. ISIS has the advantage of really trying to shock people and trying to spread their message however they can, so there are very few restraints on them. All the restraints, in fact, are going to be imposed by outside forces like Twitter itself.
Let me turn to my colleague Larry Elder. Larry, you and I used to spend a lot of time in front of a radio microphone. That's right. Morphed into a podcast, and here we are on Newsmax that has streaming video. I'm interested personally for you, have you completely done the social media thing, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all this stuff, or where do you stand on this interaction with social media?
Well, I have. I think Jacob could appreciate this. I'm an older guy. I had to be dragged kicking and screaming into this. But once I figured out Twitter, once I figured out Facebook, I realized I could reach a lot of people without interference in ways I never could before. It's really quite liberating.
And mindful of that liberation, Jacob, implicit in the title of your book, The Price of Constant Connection. In the 2 minutes that remain, what are you finding among your peers, those who are, well, this term will even sound trite and dated, webby, people who've been on the internet all their lives, people who are using all these different social media? Is there any way to separate our private and personal lives from the onslaught of social media?
I think it's very difficult. As Larry just said, I mean, these tools can seem very appealing, and they are often great in opening up new opportunities to talk to people you didn't have access to before, especially perhaps between a radio host and his audience. On the other hand, I think that a lot of people, especially a lot of young people, don't realize that we are creating vast data trails for ourselves that might be used against us for future job applications, for determining our insurance rates and things like that. There's a lot of information that's being produced that we have very little control over. And so when I talk about the price of constant connection, certainly that data collection and the constant surveillance that comes with it is one of those costs.
My generation never knew a world without television. Your generation never knew a world without social media. How does that make your generation different from mine?
Well, I think in a sense, my generation is now getting used to always creating media. Earlier generations were much more passive consumers of media. It doesn't mean they weren't sitting in front of the TV or the radio or going to the movies all the time, but it was mostly about consumption. Now you see it, everyone's transmitting, everyone's creating or retweeting, so you might just be amplifying someone else's message. But I think people are much more used to now creating sort of their own media, broadcasting their own messages, and kind of mixing it up in this new chaotic public space.
Fair enough. Jacob, we very much appreciate your time. Jacob Silverman, author of the book Terms of Service, Social Media and the Price of Constant Connection. Thanks for connecting with us, and there is more straight ahead here on America's Forum. Right now, though, we step aside for this Newsmax Now update.